Hello, gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about quarterback releases and why they're so important. This is something that I'm going to put quite a bit of emphasis on because I do think that this is one of the most important aspects of passing. If it's a pass-heavy Madden, you need to have a quarterback with a good release. There's no way around it because they're not all equal. It's not just like every quarterback has a different release and it just looks cosmetically different. They have different timings. So what I'm going to do is kind of dive into the best quarterback releases, why they're the best, what cards you have available to you, as well as like what releases that quarterbacks and regs have. It's going to be a pretty in-depth guide, so make sure to stay tuned throughout the entire video. So why are quarterback releases so important? Let me start off by saying this. There's two different kinds of people in our community. We have somebody who completely overvalues quarterback releases, where if you don't have a certain release, you're trash and you're unusable, which in my opinion is just not the case, especially this year where we have pretty good releases. I would say it used to be just Slinger 1. Like Slinger 1's what you wanted. That was easily the best release. But this year, I don't think that's the case. I do think we have an undisputed best release, but there's marginal differences between these quarterback releases. So I don't want you guys to think that you can't use something just because it's a little slower. Like we're talking milliseconds of timing where, it's not going to make you the best passer in the world just because you're using this release. So I wanted to make that very clear that quarterback releases are important and you should consider them. But at the same time, it doesn't completely ruin a player if you don't have this very specific release. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have players who just don't give a shit about what quarterback release they have, or they're just kind of unaware of why it's important. I will say that you do need to consider it because there's releases that are actually terrible. And if you're using one of the bad releases, you're going to feel it, you're going to notice it because the wind-up times on these quarterback releases are so long. You're going to have a really hard time getting the ball off if they're sending pressure at you or just getting really good pressure in general if you have a bad release. So I do want to mention, yes, you should definitely look at releases and consider one of the top options. You don't want to completely neglect releases, but at the same time, you don't want to completely overvalue them. So to answer the question more directly, why are quarterback releases so important? The answer is because it's timing based, it's animation based, and there's no reason not to consider a better release over a terrible release because it's something you have a choice over. If you're playing MUT, you have a choice over certain cards that do have one of the better releases. If you play CFM, you can just change your quarterback's release in most leagues. I don't think most leagues really care about that. So you have choice over this in most cases, and there's really no reason not to do it. So before I get into the rankings, I do need to mention a couple more important things. And the first thing is Gunslinger. This is one of the best abilities in the entire game, and it's completely capable of fixing a bad release. So the way it works is if you attach Gunslinger to your quarterback, it's going to increase his pass animation speed, and it's also going to increase the threshold before the long Hail Mary windup triggers. So what that means is like, let's say your quarterback has a 60-yard threshold before his longest windup triggers. And you don't want that because the longest windup takes a lot of time for the ball to come out of your quarterback's hands. You're oftentimes going to get hit before that ball comes out. So let's say that his max distance is 60 yards before that windup triggers. Well, Gunslinger is going to increase it. I don't know by how much exactly, but let's just say for this example, it's going to increase 60 to 70. So now anything under 70 yards, you're not going to get that long windup animation. So it's a pretty big deal because then you can kind of bomb coverages without the long windup animation and the ball is just going to come seamlessly out of your quarterback's hand. So if there's a card in MUT that you really want, but it doesn't have one of these releases that I'm about to talk about, just attach Gunslinger to him. A lot of cards by now have 0 AP Gunslinger, and it will completely fix his release and make that card usable. In CFM, I wouldn't say Gunslinger is completely necessary because you can just change your quarterback's release to one of these better releases, and it doesn't really make Gunslinger necessary. Don't get me wrong, Gunslinger will still improve these quarterbacks because, again, it'll increase that threshold before the long windup triggers. But I will say, if you can change your release, I would pretty much just do that and not really worry about Gunslinger. Okay, now let's talk about these quarterback release rankings. So I'm going to talk about my criteria very briefly because there are some important things in here as well. The first thing is that release timings are one of the most important things, obviously. So I'm going to post something on the screen, which is a chart where every quarterback release is mentioned. you have numbers next to each of these quarterback releases. And basically what this does is shows you that these releases are in fact not equal. EA has assigned number values to each of these releases depending on short throws, medium throws, deep throws, and in some cases throwing left to right, or left or right, I should say. So these releases have very different numbers. And one thing I want to mention about this chart is that while I think it's helpful, I don't think this is something that you should just follow blindly. I think that there is a release on here that is very, very good, but on the chart, it doesn't look that good. So the number values don't fully translate, but I do think that this is a decent guideline. Now, the rest of the criteria, it's kind of just like general consensus, cards available to you in MUT in regards to just how many cards have this release, are they actually good cards? And then lastly, just my opinion, and that's the way I'm going to order these. Okay, so here are the rankings. I'm going to go ahead and make different throws with each of these releases just to show you kind of what the wind-up animation looks like and all that. So coming in at number 5, we have Traditional 1. Now, there isn't any quarterback in regs that has Traditional 1. I had to change Mac Jones from Traditional 3 to Traditional 1 just for the sake of demonstration. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to throw short, I'll throw medium, and I'll throw deep just to show you these different animations. But the reason I have Traditional 1 at number 5 is because according to the chart, it is one of the better releases in the game. There's pretty fast releases on all 3 levels of the field. The problem is, again, in regs, there is literally nobody that has this release. And then in MUT, it's only Joe Montana. So for some reason, this release is extremely exclusive. I don't really understand why. And that's why it comes in at number 5. Now, if you play in a CFM and you can change a quarterback's release and you really like Traditional 1, go for it, because I do think it is one of the better releases in the game. Number 1 is better in my opinion, which we'll obviously get to that in a little bit. But if you just really like this release, you just like how it looks, how the ball comes out of his hand, you can definitely use it. It's an option for you. And then I went ahead and backed up the ball so I can demonstrate his deep ball and what his windup looks like when you throw it deep with Traditional 1. And I'm going to try to get as much time as I can in the pocket. And that's what his windup looks like. And overall, I think it's pretty good. I don't think that's a crazy long windup. I don't know for sure if I'm hitting the threshold to get that Hail Mary windup, but that's about as deep as you need to throw. So let's have a look at this release on the deep ball. And overall, I think that comes out of Traditional 1's hand very, very well. Coming in at number 4, we have Traditional 2, which is a release that, according to the chart, isn't very good, but it just seems to play better than the numbers indicate, at least in my opinion. And there's a couple good quarterbacks that do have this release. So Joe Burrow is one of them, and then CJ Stroud is the other. So what I'm going to do is actually post a link in the description as well as a comment section that shows every quarterback's release, or I guess every starting quarterback's release. So you guys can refer to that if you want. But let's go ahead and have a look at his short throw here. No issues there with the short throw to the right. I will say in some cases, short throw to the left can be different than short throw to the right, depending on handedness. He's a right-handed quarterback. That seems to come out fine as well. Let's go ahead and have a look at these intermediate throws. We'll try to hit this angle post. That came out really well, actually. Let's go to instant replay. We had a blitzer coming right at us, and this is a good demonstration as to why quarterback release matters. So blitzer's coming in. That comes out pretty quickly on an intermediate throw. So it looks pretty good there. Now let's go ahead and throw deep to the left. So just max protect. And hopefully get enough time. That was kind of the long windup there. So that just kind of shows you if you have Gunslinger, that's probably going to come out faster. And I don't know if that was the full windup there, but that came out pretty quickly. Let me go ahead and wait just a little bit longer. The pressure is getting in just a little too fast for my liking. Can't really seem to throw it much deeper, but I do think his long windup is probably going to be pretty slow. But again, you add Gunslinger, that's going to add more yardage before that long windup triggers. Coming in at number 3, we have Slinger 3. And this is a release that, in my opinion, benefits from the players and cards that do have this release. So in MUT, we have Troy Aikman, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson. And then in Regs, it's the same 2 players, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson. And I think it's a pretty good release overall. I think there's a pretty sizable gap between this one and number 2 and number 1. But at the same time, I think this release is definitely usable. So let's have a look. There's a short throw. We'll do a short one to the left as well. That seemed a little bit slower. But again, we're not timing. We're just kind of doing, just based on our eye test. For some reason, this just seemed a little bit slower. Let's hit the angle post. The mid-read kind of took that away. Let's go ahead and try to hit that again. Let's have a look at the intermediate throw real quick. That comes out pretty quickly. I think he might have Gunslinger, which is going to make it a... No, he doesn't. He just has pass lead elite. Okay, so we're still valid here. And then lastly, let's have a look at his deep throw. So there's his long windup. And that did seem to have quite a bit of a windup. And this is a deep throw to the left. You should probably flip it as well and is check the right, because I do think it's going to be slightly different. So let's have a look at deep throw to the right as well. And that came out of his hand, honestly, way faster. I don't know if that was the full windup speed, but he didn't even go into that kind of like full launching the ball animation. Let's have a look. And maybe it's because it's to the same side of the field as his hand. So yeah, this seemed quite a bit faster than throwing deep to the left. And again, it just kind of comes, I think it comes down to your quarterback's handedness. If he's right-handed, he could probably throw it to the right a little bit better than the left. I think that's pretty natural. But that's not reflected in the chart. So I just want to make that clear. This is something that is just how the quarterback plays. Coming in at number 2, we have Slinger 1. And historically, this is the release that everybody looks for. So at the start of this year, this is what everybody wanted. They wanted Slinger 1 because in previous years, that was like the undisputed best release. I do think it got dethroned later in this year when people found a different release. But I will say this one is very comparable to number 1. This is something that has a very fast release across the board. And there's really good cards that do have Slinger 1. So I'm using Aaron Rodgers. He has Slinger 1. You also have Joe Flacco, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love. I used Joe Flacco for the longest time, and I loved his release. I didn't even use Gunslinger, and I really had no issues getting the ball off. Now, granted, I wasn't really throwing too deep most of the time, but really for short and intermediate, he was getting the job done without Gunslinger. So this is just a throw to the right flats. Let's go ahead and check out the left flats now. See how the ball just comes out? Let's go back to instant replay. I just love the way the ball comes out on Slinger 1. It's so pretty. See how snappy that is? It's like the ball comes out slightly faster than his arm coming forward. Now let's check out the intermediate. Very fast as well. And now let's check deep left and deep right. That also comes out very snappy. That wasn't the full windup animation, but let's have a look here. This was on a deep throw still. And he has that same snappy release. Very good. Let's try to get the full windup this time. And I don't think that was the full windup. There was just really nothing on that throw. Now let me go ahead and throw it to the right side of the field real quick before we move on to number 1. And that was more of the full windup. You see how the ball just didn't come fully out yet? Let me go just motion this guy out instead. And that comes out really, really well. He launched it that time. And again, that might have to do with throwing to the right side of the field instead of the left. One last look at Slinger 1. And see how that ball comes out before we get hit? That is the difference a good release makes. And finally, at number 1, we have Traditional 4. Now, this is the consensus favorite release in Madden 24. And this is by pro players, by just community players. And I think that's reflected in the cards that EA has been dropping this year that do have Traditional 4. So in MUT, you have like Bo Jackson, Lamar Jackson, Doug Williams, William Perry, Steve McNair. There is just a ton of good quarterbacks with Traditional 4, and I don't think that's any coincidence. Now, according to the chart, this release isn't very good, but this is why you don't follow the chart completely. This release is actually insane. I do agree that it is the number 1 in the game. And the only quarterback in regs that has it is Lamar Jackson. But I do think it's very snappy. Now, it is, I wouldn't say a ton better than Slinger 1. I do think Slinger 1, Traditional 4 are definitely S tier. Those are the two that are kind of standing above the rest. But again, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is somewhat marginal. I do think release matters, but you have to remember, these are milliseconds here. This is not going to make you a good passer if you're using Traditional 4. You still got to be good at the game. So there's our short throw to the right. Let's do the intermediate throw. Actually, let's do the short to the left now. And then let's do intermediate, and we'll slow that one down. Let me go to instant replay to kind of show this one. I would say this was probably the least impressive, was the intermediate. Let's have another look here. Now that still comes out pretty nice. I do think I prefer Slinger 1's intermediate, but that is still pretty good. And then lastly, let's talk about his deep throws. So we'll do deep left first. Just got pressured pretty badly there. Let's get a better look here. That was a beautiful deep ball. That was really, really nice. Let's go to instant replay. That came out beautifully. I'm surprised because it was deep left. I was assuming his deep right was going to be better. But look how that came out. That long windup is really good. So his longest windup's not even that bad. Now let's do the right side. I just got pressured really badly. Let me redo that. Let me double team that guy over there. Oh, I forgot to motion that guy out. My bad. But pretty much the same deal. Look at how that ball comes out to the right side. I think this is what really sets Traditional 4 apart. These deep throws are pretty incredible. I don't know why I'm doing that. Yeah, that his long windup really isn't even long. That just comes out so fast. So yeah, this is where Traditional 4 makes its money compared to Slinger 1 for sure. Anyways, that's going to wrap up my quarterback release guide. Hopefully this helps you guys out in regards to understanding the importance of quarterback releases, as well as just seeing some of the best releases in action. But if you guys have any questions remaining, just drop them in the comments. I'll be sure to answer. Or you can join our Discord. You can find the link to it in the description of the video. Just click it and then join and then ask me questions whenever. I'll be sure to answer in there as well. And then, yeah, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe. And then, as always, if you want to win more games, acemadden.com is the place to be. We have detailed schemes on offense and defense that will just make the game so much easier for you. So just become a member. You'll gain access to everything we have on the site. And then, yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.